Hey, 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 we're back again. You can't shake us. Welcome, my friend Jane Allen, the wonderful, talented entrepreneur here based in Nashville. Jane, thanks for joining us tonight.
Absolutely, Mark. Thank you for asking.
It's an honor and a pleasure to spend some time talking with you about your journey. And I just really appreciate it.
Sure.
So, kind of as we talked a little bit on the pregame, what I would love to kind of, the starting point for me is I'm always interested in where people come from, the origin story, what mom and dad did. So can you kind of back us up in time to those early years and describe a little bit about kind of where you're from and a little bit about your family life, and then we'll kind of move through your through the continuum of your entrepreneurial journey.
Sure. I am the youngest of four
Okay.
and was born in Western Kentucky. My father was a federal agent. He worked for Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms,
Hmm.
ATF. And my mother, when I was born, was a stay-at-home mom. And we moved, my dad got promoted, and we moved to Eastern Kentucky, which would be in the Ashland, Kentucky area.
Yeah.
And I was probably 2, so my first memories are formed in Eastern Kentucky. And, um, again, just sort of an idyllic childhood, um, and then at about the age of 5, I can remember my mother, who was a registered nurse, wanting to go to work,
Hmm.
and that created some conflict in the family.
Ah.
And my sister is 10 years older, and I believe, she was just at this point of Janie is my last,
Uh-huh.
and I want to use my degree and experience and help others as a nurse. And my father really did not want her to work. And so one of my early memories actually is my father sitting me down and saying, Janie, don't you want your mom here all the time?
Uh-huh.
And of course, that answer is an obvious yes. It was a leading question, as
Of
I
course.
later learned as an adult.
I was going to say, as
Um,
a lawyer, right? You
exactly,
okay?
exactly. And so, but at the end of the day, my mom chose to go back to work. And I ended up, as my father would love to brag to people, I'm the only person that failed kindergarten because they ended up sending me to kindergarten a year early with one of my close friends. And the kindergarten, you have to understand, Mark, was 2 doors down from where we lived.
Right.
And so I would go there, and then after that, there was an older woman that lived on our street, Minnie Thompson, and she would come and pick me up. And maybe 2 or 3 days a week. I mean, mom never worked full time,
Hmm.
but I liked it. I never thought anything different about it. It wasn't a problem. And and then as we move forward, thankfully mom was working because my parents ended up divorcing within a year to 2 years after that.
Interesting.
And so yes, and so she went from president of the PTA, flower club, you know,
Yeah.
den mother, to working full time
Keep
as a nurse,
keeping the family moving. Yeah.
keeping the family moving. And unfortunately, my father, made some bad choices and ended up losing his job. And so thankfully mom had a job.
Hmm.
And so my life is very much divided pre-divorce, post-divorce.
Which is
Because
like a death. Yeah, when
yeah,
you think about it, right?
hmm,
Yeah.
exactly. And I was 7 when my parents divorced, and we were the only divorced family in our community. Um, and that we knew of anyway. And I know, like, even my little school really didn't know what to do with me. So I would miss 20 to 30 days a year because I would travel with my dad.
Got it.
And, I can remember he's the one that taught me my state capitals. He taught me multiplication. He taught me logic games. I mean,
Yeah.
and we had a wonderful relationship, but I traveled with my dad quite a bit in those early elementary school years.
And so just for because I'm curious about that. So how
Mhm.
did that work? Was the dynamics there adversarial between mom and dad, and or was it more collegial? I mean, how and did that impact how he sort of interacted with you?
I will say a lot. I was protected. I was 7,
Hmm.
and so unlike my sister who was 17,
Hmm.
I didn't see the drama.
Yeah.
And I knew mom was very devastated and very sad
Hmm.
and lost a lot of weight, but she never said a negative word about my father to me.
Hmm.
And he never said a word about my mother that was anything other than she's wonderful.
Yeah.
And so I really was protected, and I was the only one my father had any custodial rights to because of my age.
Oh, got
And
it.
so,
So your brothers and sisters, you were really the youngest one in the barn.
well, I was 7, my other brother was 11, and the other brother was 15, and my sister was 17.
Okay.
And so the 11, 15, and 17, I think they were old enough to say, absolutely not.
Mhm.
And I was there every other weekend,
Okay.
with my father and his new wife, and then what became, and then their child.
Mhm.
But I really spent more time with my father alone because, again, when he would travel,
Sure.
he ended up getting another job, and it required a lot of travel, and he would take me with him.
Did he sell, or was he still doing more like ATF style enforcement work, or?
No, he ended up going to work for Ashland Coal, I think
Mm.
it was, or it wasn't Ashland Coal yet. He worked to work for a coal company. And so basically, I can remember being at a young age and going into courthouses in small town Kentucky and pulling the deed books, and he would be looking at who owned what property.
Yep.
And then we would go visit the people that owned the property and talk to them about signing over their mineral rights.
Yep.
And and my father had a wonderful gift of being able to talk to everybody.
Anybody. Yeah.
And he was just I mean, he was really, really good. And it didn't matter where you were on the spectrum of life, you were an individual that he treated with respect.
Mm.
And and so it was a wonderful lesson in a lot of ways for me, um, to be able to have that type of relationship with my father. And that, I mean, it was probably 3 or 4 years that I would travel with him. And then even in the summers, when I didn't miss so much school, I would travel with him in the summers as well.
So that early exposure, and when I think, as we get further down into your story, I know that some of the problem you were trying to solve seems to be rooted in your family story.
Yes, without question.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And
That's
especially my mother. Um,
right.
yes.
Interesting. So, okay,
Mhm.
so you have this sort of fracture which produces some interesting, to me, it's always interesting, when you think about, and I don't want to call it failure, but when something gives and it leads to something that was unanticipated, you can take that two ways.
Absolutely.
You can do something amazing with it, or you can do something not amazing with it. And it
Mhm.
sounds like it turned into something that actually informed part of how you work in the world. Is that fair?
I think that is fair. And I think, I feel very, very blessed, in what could have been a horrible situation and what could have been, we're one of a many statistics. My mother, she was strong, she perseveres, and she was positive.
Yeah.
And so again, I know it was such a difficult time for her, but she really, I mean, she would take my brother and me fishing. She would go and she just did the best she could, and she just was a really positive person. And and she never tried to keep me from my dad. She never talked bad about my dad. Um, she was very aware at a time when it was really not common, um, to realize that was my father,
Yeah.
and any negative word she would say about him was in some ways negative about me.
Hmm.
And I think she knew that. And so she just would never tarnish my view of my father
Yeah.
when I was so young.
And
And
and that sounds like it continued, right? So as you
it did.
continue forward, that's great.
Yeah. No, and I did. I had a really good relationship with my father and my mother,
Yeah.
without question.
So you roll into your teenage years. Now mom is really kind of in charge of the whole kit and caboodle.
Yes.
And by that time, your sister's probably out. So,
Yes.
the nest is starting to empty. And
Right.
where do you find, what was the itch you were scratching in that period? In other words, were you into like art? What was kind of driving your bus, in terms of your level of interest? Avid reader? What was driving you?
Mark, I was social. I wish I was talented enough to be an artist. I
Mhm.
wish I was talented enough to be a cheerleader. I wish, but I was just sort of average or good.
Yeah.
And so I love sports. My brothers played, especially my brother Tim, who was only 4 years older than me. He played baseball and basketball. In our community, Friday night football, I mean, that was a big deal. And so I just grew up going to athletic events and being a fan. And
Mhm.
then you meet with all your friends, and then you go out for pizza after. And so I think for me, it really was about being with friends.
Yep.
And, in school, it came pretty easy to me. Um, I never really had to study, but I did fine.
Yep.
Um, and so it was much more about social. And I was friends with, again, people from all around. And I mean, it's whether you were a jock or you weren't a jock or you were smart or you weren't. So, I mean, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
We were just friends.
A
So
kind of
for me, it was social.
a gift from your father in a way, right?
Exactly. I think
Anybody.
so.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so as you're kind of, you're now, kind of coming to this moment in, and I don't know for you, for me, I always thought of college as sort of high school with ashtrays. It was like far enough away from mom and dad to, give me some freedom. But if things got problematic, there was always
Hmm.
that sort of valve. So talk a little bit as you're moving kind of into that next phase in college. Um, what what was your sort of decision matrix around, here's where I think I'm headed?
Hmm.
And then how did you sort of land in that spot where you went, okay, this is interesting. This is something I could see myself doing for a period.
Our experiences were very different. When I was 15, my father was given 6 months to live.
Oh,
And so and while we were fortunate, he lived a lot longer than what they thought. I never wanted to depend on him financially,
right,
ever.
right.
And my mom was doing the best she could. And so I started working at 15 years old, and we moved to Florida for my mother's health.
Okay.
And so at the same time, before my father was diagnosed, my mom had some heart issues, and they basically told her, go where you could be outside, you can walk, you can exercise. And so when I was a junior in high school, she moved to Florida.
Okay.
And I um, did not, I went and I threw a fit. I was a spoiled brat. And, how dare she? Because she had made a commitment, to go back. When the divorce was in process, my mom took all of us to Florida. And God love her, it took her 4 days to get there. And she fell in love with it.
Mm,
And she found a job and everything. But then at the end of the day, she could not move my siblings and I out of our close knit community.
yeah.
And so she said, once Janie graduates, I'm moving to Florida.
Yep.
And so we always knew that. And then, like I said, she had some health issues. And so she had to leave between my sophomore and junior year. And so I, of course, went with her, but I was a terror. How dare you? You promised, the
Mhm.
fact that her health was an issue, I was just spoiled.
Well, when your
And
when your prefrontal cortex is not fully developed, you don't have one, and you don't really recognize what you're doing. So
Well, thank you, Mark. That's another way to say it. But I was not a pleasant kid.
Yeah.
And so meanwhile, I figured out how I could move back and I could live with a friend of my father's,
Okay.
and who was a widow in our town. And so I did. I moved back in October. And deep down, I knew as I was leaving, I was making a mistake.
Mm.
But by gosh, I was going to see it through.
Can
And
I
so yeah, go ahead, love.
can we unpack that? So you're talking about something that I think is really interesting when you know and yet you don't, right?
Hmm.
You make the decision and you know it's the wrong one and you do it anyway. Unpack
Hmm.
that a little bit.
Yeah, I think I feel it's what you said earlier. It's which side do you want to focus on? And
Mhm.
so I was focused on all the negative. My friends are in Kentucky. I don't have any friends here, and they're a bunch of druggies, and this is a horrible environment. And you know,
Yeah.
not really all truthful, but that's what I was focused on. And my friends were calling, we miss you, we want you to come back.
Mm.
And so it all started, late August, early September. But by the time I actually went back, which would have been what was called Columbus Day
Mhm.
in October, that weekend, I was starting to play tennis. I had met people.
Mm.
Um, it wasn't so bad.
Yeah.
But I had made a commitment to my friends. I had committed to my dad, and his friend had welcomed me into her home. And so it was just very much of a, well, I made this decision. I'm not going to overthink it. I'm just going to go.
Yeah.
And I
And you were
did.
17 at the time?
I would have been probably 16 at the time.
That's a pretty big move for a 16-year-old. Even if you're moving back to your own community, when you think about kind of that, that's a bold decision.
Yeah. And mom let me go.
Hmm.
And she was right for doing so because I was pretty strong and independent,
Mhm.
and I could have made her life really miserable. And and we talked about it obviously later, because what happened is when I went back to see her, I went back to Florida for Christmas, I told her I wanted to come back.
Mm.
And she said no. And she was like, "You know what? You made a choice, and
Yeah.
you're not going to be a ping pong ball. And you made a choice. And as hard as it is for me to tell you that, you need to live with the choice you made."
And do you feel like in retrospect that that hard decision was the right one from her?
Brilliant. Brilliant.
Why?
Because one, taught me that there are consequences for every choice you make, good
Mhm.
and bad.
Yep.
Two, I couldn't use her. She was not going to let me manipulate her ever again. I
Mm.
wasn't going to use guilt. I wasn't going to use shame. I could not manipulate her. And three, it taught me sometimes you have to love something so much that you're willing to let it go.
Mm.
And that was really the way I looked at it. And so she did let me, once I finished my junior year, she let me come back.
Mm.
And I came back with a whole new attitude. You're talking about being positive. I was positive, and they had rezoned me. So I went to an older established high school there called Dunedin High School. And I went into it and I made friends. I was editor on on the yearbook. My interest in sports,
Yep.
and I was the sports editor on the high school yearbook. And I had a great senior year. And that was a valuable lesson on your attitude. It's which side do you want to look, positive or negative?
It's also
And
interesting when you think about this idea that there's a moment, and I'm watching this. It's happened already, right? Where the parental influence is waning, and the influence of friends, which it sounds like was a big reason or a big part of your
huge.
decision matrix,
Mhm.
it takes over, and the idea that your parents, around the time you're 14, 15 years old, become incredibly stupid, and they're stupid for about 10 years, and then all of a sudden they've they're back to being wise. Sounds like there was that moment, but that you had that her decision to sort of hold you to your word accelerated that for you.
Without question.
Yeah.
And I remember when I left to go back, one of my friends, and I'm still friends with several of these people, but one of them said, "You know what, Janie, you're just going to college a year earlier. We're all going to be leaving next year."
Yeah.
And that was sort of yeah, you're right. And so I think, but it did teach me family is the core to everything.
Yeah.
And I love my friends. Believe me, like I said, that was my life at that, middle school, early high school, but family was really so much more important. And I learned that at a really young age, which I feel very fortunate to have done.
So in that period, I get the sense you lost your father. How old were you when you?
No, I mean, my father continued to live. When I moved back to Florida, I got a job and I
Okay.
worked. And then I ended up applying to colleges. And I remember Vanderbilt was one of them.
Mhm.
And it was the first time my sister, um, again, who's 10 years my senior, she let me know that if I went there, I would not be like everybody else. Because quite honestly, I had never felt poor
Mhm.
and we didn't have a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so I ended up deciding I'm just going to keep my life where it is. I'm going to stay where in the same town as my mom. And I did move out, but I worked full time and I went to a junior college and I paid for it all myself.
Mhm.
And so for me, college was very much about a means to an end. I knew I had to financially support myself when I graduated in 4 years, and I had to support myself. And my father and my mother both gave me a little money each month to get me through college.
Sure.
But otherwise, I, did the 2 years because I needed to transfer a lot of my credits.
Yep.
And then I went to University of South Florida in Tampa. But
Okay.
again, I kept my job. I worked in Clearwater. I commuted every day to Tampa, would go to school, 7 to 2, and I'd work 3 to 10.
Wow.
And then I worked every weekend. And so I've just always been a worker,
Mm.
for lack of a better term. And again, I was fortunate in that school came pretty easy for me.
Mhm.
And so for me, I was originally, now to answer your question about, college, I
Yeah.
was originally a business major.
Okay.
And it was in my second year where I realized I'm going to school to get a degree to do what I'm already doing because I was
Hmm.
somewhat managing a store in the mall. And I thought, and then a friend of mine had offered me a position to come and manage his doctor's office. And he was going to expand to grow 3 or 4, and he wanted me to manage and do the expansion. And so I really debated dropping out of school.
Hmm.
And my mom, again, a brilliant woman, we would walk on the beach most Sunday mornings. And that was sort of our church at that time in our lives.
Yeah.
And we would walk on the beach. And she, you know, and she was like, "Why would you think of quitting college?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Because mom, I'm paying to get a degree to do what I'm already doing. And this is an opportunity for me to grow beyond where I am and I can earn more money." And she said, "Baby, if you could do anything, what would you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I'd be a teacher."
Hmm.
And she said, "Then why aren't you a teacher?" I said, "Because I've got to make money."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
she said,
Teaching does not pay the rent, right?
"I really believe if you do what you love, money will always follow.
Hmm.
And so I would strongly encourage you to do what you think you would love to do."
Hmm. That's
And
great.
so, what it really did was keep me in college because then I ended up going in, switching my major. I became an education major, a math minor, because I used all my business classes as my minor.
Yep.
And then when I went over to USF, I was straight into the education department, had a fabulous experience, got a job right out of my internship, and was a second grade school teacher. And I
and
could support myself.
you could,
So
right.
I could. Yeah.
And so I want to go back to the beach for a minute, because when I think about one of the things I love about the beach, you referenced it as church at the time. That's a place to feel really small,
Mhm.
and a place to feel like this is all changing all the time. You
Mhm.
know, every day that beach is different. And it reminds me of a story, and it's actually related to teaching. Are you familiar with the story of the starfish?
Yeah.
It's here's the short version. A gentleman walks out onto the beach. There's been a big storm, and all these starfish are washed up on the beach. And he looks down the beach, and he sees this small human and crouching down, and then coming. And there, this it's as this little girl comes closer, he sees that she's picking up these individual starfish and throwing them back into the water. And she gets to him, and he looks down at her and says, "Why are you doing that? You can't possibly help all these starfish." And she looks up at him, and then she looks down, and she picks up a starfish and throws it back in the water. And she said, "I helped that one." And to me, that's teaching, right?
Absolutely.
That in a
Absolutely.
nutshell. And it's hard work. I think it's gotten a lot harder. I mean, if
Mhm.
you think about kind of what teachers face today versus
Absolutely.
you faced, um, it's just a very different dynamic. But it is a thing. I think we're put here to help each other,
Mhm.
and finding what that is, and having your mother sort of tapping you again and saying, "Are you sure that you shouldn't be chasing or doing what's in your heart?" What a great thing for her, and what a great way to do it,
Mhm.
to sort of
Exactly.
without telling you.
Right. Just leading.
Yeah,
Like I
just
said, she figured me out.
okay. So now you're gainfully employed. You're a second grade teacher. Life is pretty good.
Mhm.
That's an interesting. When I think about kind of where you've landed, that's not what I would have expected the early story to be. So now you're teaching, you're enjoying that. What kind of came next? What was the next catalytic moment for you?
Um, a couple of things. One is in teaching, um, and maybe it was just the school I was at, and it was a great school. I loved our principal. I was probably one of the few people that did, because usually the teachers complain about the administration. And I was teaching with other people, and they were all older than me, and none of them were happy.
Hmm.
And they complained about the students all the time.
Hmm.
And I remember thinking, I don't want to become them.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I realized I'd gotten through college and my education was over, and I'd never really applied myself. And so I had those two things going in my head.
Okay.
And I loved teaching. I wasn't unhappy teaching. I enjoyed it. But a really good friend of mine from college, uh, I was talking to her, and she was going to take the LSAT. And, I'm like, what's the LSAT? And she said, oh, it's an admittance exam for law school. And I said, oh, well, how did you sign up to do that? And long story short, she gave me a phone number to call so I could late register. And so I did, and so on my break, I called, I registered to take the LSAT, and, and then I that was sort of it, and I didn't tell anyone except my friend Missy,
Yeah.
and I didn't take a class, I didn't do anything except I did, and I always thought this was the most valuable lesson. I went and got a practice book.
Hmm.
And I remember one evening I took 15, it was 30 question sets, and I did 15 questions, and I'm a 0 out of 15. And
Hmm.
then I went out and met a friend for a drink, and I had a drink, and I came back and I took the next 15, and I missed 10 out of 15.
Hmm.
And so when I was in law school, I never drank after Thanksgiving. And so, but so anyway, so I did practice tests out of this book,
Yeah.
and then I took the LSAT, and quite frankly, I got my scores and had no idea what they meant because I didn't know. And the reason I took the LSAT and the reason I didn't tell anyone is my sister was by this time a lawyer.
Oh, really? Okay.
Uh-huh. And my sister is one of the smartest people I've ever met in my life. And so I never dreamt that I was smart enough to be able to go to law
Yeah, to
school.
do that gig. Yep.
But then I started meeting some other people who were lawyers, and I thought, well, I know I'm smarter than him.
Mhm.
And so it was just sort of like, and then when she and I just thought, the little bit I knew about being a lawyer, and in our hometown, the people you looked up to and respected, quite frankly, my friends' fathers were lawyers.
Hmm.
And so it was, well, I'll take this test. And if I do good, then maybe I could go to Stetson Law School at night and then
Hmm.
I would teach during the day.
Yep.
And and if I don't do good, and then I know I'm not meant to be a lawyer. So
Right.
that was sort of the thought process as I went in to take the LSAT. And then when I got my scores, I didn't know what they meant. And so that's when I called my sister.
And it turns out that those scores were good.
They were good. Yes,
Yeah.
they were good. And so I ended up getting a scholarship to the University of Kentucky Law School, and I did not work. It was the first time I'd ever been a student, and I loved every minute of it. And the light bulbs just kept going off, and um, I had great people that I was in class with, and professors, and I relished just being able to be a student because
Mhm.
I had never had that experience.
Yeah, I think sometimes when things, I mean, this is when things come easy, you don't necessarily um they don't seem as important, right?
Mhm,
And
mhm.
you sort of gloss through it. Not this, I mean, for me it was the same thing. I didn't really, school for me was more of a social experiment than it was a learning experiment, right?
Mhm.
And
Sure.
you get there and you find it's almost like it sounds like you're describing, you found your people, you found your tribe.
Mhm, mhm.
And
Without
so,
question.
and now you're back in Kentucky, which
And I'm back in Kentucky.
and I feel like there is it sounds like there's a strong rooting to that place. Is that
There
fair?
is. Yes, and actually my father was still alive,
Okay.
and he would come pretty much every weekend,
Mm.
and, until my mother finally called and said, "Jamie needs to make friends, and you need to give her a
Leave
little
her alone.
space." But I loved hanging out with my dad, and so
Yeah.
we'd go to the UK football game or
Mhm.
but mom was right, of course, and, but yes, it was. I just enjoyed it immensely, and, and my sister was in Cincinnati at the time, which is 2 hours up the
A couple,
road.
that's a couple hours drive.
Yeah, and then my other brother was a teacher, in Eastern Kentucky, about 2 hours the other direction. So, I mean, there was a little bit of coming home without question.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So that process, you move through that, and did you have an area of interest in the law, or did that develop? Did your practice, as you're going through that, through the continuum? Did you find yourself gravitating towards specific areas of law?
I really just assumed I would do business since
Hmm.
that was sort of my background a little bit.
Yep.
And then I remember I had it's called Lit Skills, which is litigation skills class. And those would be adjunct professors, which are lawyers in the community that come in and teach it. And when I got to law school, make no mistake, the first semester I was just like, what have I done? I mean, you have all these people that are poli sci majors and they've dreamt of going to law school since they were two.
Yeah.
And I'm an elementary school teacher. Like I do not fit in here.
I would say
Um,
you actually probably had an interesting advantage in a way that
well,
you
and
would
that's what
reveal itself later.
and that's exactly and that was in this lit skills class that you would have to prepare an opening argument or a closing or a cross examination or and that was so easy for me.
Hmm.
So easy because I could take any complicated subject and I could break it down to a second grade level
Yep.
and I can make it fun and entertaining.
Uh-huh.
And so I remember after that class, the two gentlemen came up and they're like, I'm not sure what you're going to do, but if you're not a litigator, you're doing yourself a disservice because it's natural.
Well, and
And
litigation in a way is storytelling and selling, right?
right, exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly. And so, and then because of my sister, I knew the benefits of a federal clerkship, and I was fortunate enough to do okay in law school. And I was given an opportunity to clerk for a federal judge. And so that's what I did. So that also allowed me to see and almost be, a student of the craft as I would watch lawyers come into the courtroom
Yeah.
and into chambers. And so, yes, I became a litigator.
Yeah. Sitting inside is a huge benefit.
Hmm.
Being able to see how the sausage is made before you decide whether you want to make it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah.
So cool.
That's what,
Okay, so
yeah.
you pop out the backside. You're a litigator,
Yep.
and you're in Kentucky, and
Mhm.
now you've got to decide what to do with those skills. So what was the next jump?
I had interned at a firm in Tampa, and I had an offer to go back to Tampa. And they held the offer so I could complete my federal clerkship. But I knew deep down I did not want to go back.
Mm-hmm.
And so I ended up, calling them and thanking them and just sort of flying without a safety net.
Yeah.
And I remember my judge, who was an amazing man and such a phenomenal mentor to me. And long story short, there was a gentleman who had a trial, and he came in. He was talking about how great these jury instructions were, and this and this. And he said, "Well, that's all my law clerk. You should talk to her." And so they asked me because my judge sat in Western Kentucky, and so we sat in Paducah, Bowling Green, Owensboro, and Louisville. And he was an old circuit rider, but he had us all live in Paducah.
Hmm.
And um, and so this gentleman asked if I would open their Paducah office. And so, right out of my clerkship, I ended up opening a branch for a law firm in Paducah. And, sometimes it's good to be, naive and
Mm.
not realize really what you're, because it's like, of course I
Yeah,
can.
of course I'll do that.
Of
Yeah.
course I'll do this. Of course I will. And so, but it was great because what it really did was taught me about the business of law
Mhm.
and what it took to, you know, make sure you weren't losing money and, clients and billable hours and hiring. And so I learned a lot in that experience that was very invaluable for me as I moved forward with my career.
Hmm.
And
Eh,
so that's where I worked. And then I met Greg, who
mhm.
is actually from Paducah, but he had just graduated from business school at University of Pennsylvania, and he had come home for a couple months before he started his job in Nashville.
Okay.
And so we met in that window while he was in Paducah.
I want to go back to something you were talking about earlier around you had this other path you were potentially running down where you were going to open up offices for this doctor, and you end up over here basically doing the same trick, just in a different area of business, right?
Yeah.
And that to me, kind of in the parallel I'll draw there is you had this a seemingly a sort of innate confidence, or I'll use your word, naivete, like, oh, well, of course I'll do that, right?
Mhm.
Which is a lot of what it takes to do kind of where we're headed in your story, right? Which is to say, of
Right.
course I can do that. Why couldn't I? So you
Right.
you establish this new office. You've got you've really had one career already,
Mhm.
and you then meet the man who will become your husband, and you're establishing yourself. How old are you at this point?
When we married, I was 30. So this
Okay,
was 28, 29.
28, 29. And then
Mhm.
did you follow him to Nashville? Was that the next move?
That was. Um I really lobbied to stay in Western Kentucky
Hmm.
and thought that my career opportunities would be really good if I stayed in Western Kentucky. You know, understanding Greg grew up in Western Kentucky. Greg had gone to Georgia Tech. He went to University of Pennsylvania. The idea of coming back to Western Kentucky was not what he had envisioned.
Yeah.
And he was very much the entrepreneur,
Yeah.
not me.
Hmm.
And he thought he had picked Nashville as a town that he thought would explode in the 90s. And so this was really where he had put a lot of thought into where he wanted to live.
Mhm.
But, you know, eventually I we agreed that, okay, I'll give it a shot. And I said, if I can work with a guy named Jim Doremus.
Mhm.
And so, you know, being so flexible that I am, but basically I had pulled my judge used to loan me out to other federal judges. And
Hmm.
then when they would come to Paducah, I'd have them and their clerks over for dinner. And so I just called a few and said, hey, if I'm moving to Nashville, is there anybody you think that I should try to work with?
Yeah.
And Jim Doremus's name was given to me by my judge,
Okay.
as well as another judge. And so I told Greg, I said, you know, and so, you know, fate or whatever it is, Byron Trager, who was Jim's partner,
Mhm.
represented the company that Greg was working with.
Hmm.
And so when Byron was in, Greg handed him my resume and said, you know, my fiance would love to work at your all's firm. And I got a call from Jim. I drove down, I got the offer and got the job. And that was, I mean, it was that easy.
Wow. And
Mhm.
so that would so what year was this?
That would have been in 1991.
So you and I arrived here about the same time.
Mhm.
And he
No,
was
wait, hold on. No, I graduated law school in 91, got married in 94. So it was 1994.
so I got here in late 90.
Okay.
And your husband was right, obviously. We'll get there.
Yes.
Maybe too
Yes.
right.
Very right. I remember him taking me down on the riverfront and he was like, there's this guy that's going to have a rally and he is going to be the person to do it. And this guy's name is Phil Bredesen.
Uh-huh.
And I remember there were like, you know, 50 people there
Yeah.
and going and watching this guy. And it was like, huh, really? He was like, trust me. So, as
Turns
with
out,
everything,
yeah,
Greg is right. I mean, you know, so.
that's cool. Okay, so the plane lands here in 94
Mhm.
and you get it really in a way that how do I I mean, I don't want to say it was too easy, but in a way, the path was pretty clear and pretty easy at that moment, right?
It
You've
was.
arrived, you got the job you wanted with the working with the people you wanted, and your life starts here. So
Mhm.
now that's kind of where we are in the storyline. So what's next? What happens next?
You know, everybody at the firm had clerked for a federal judge. And so one thing I loved about it is there was a little bit of everything and a lot of federal court practice and, you know, and state court. But I really like the variety and love the people I worked with. And, you know, I enjoyed it and I got pregnant. And I always thought, "Oh, I'll put the pack and play in the office, full steam ahead. It's not gonna slow me down." And, you know, it was at about the time where, you know, your practice starts and clients start calling you. And so I was actually in the delivery room and they came in with a fax and somebody wanted me to review their contract. And I just thought, this is going to be tough.
Yeah.
And, and that started me
In the
thinking,
delivery room.
mhm, 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 mhm. Yep.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I guess they just faxed it to, I have no idea how
Yeah.
but they faxed it to the hospital and they found me and they brought it in and you know, it was just one of those where I just thought this is going to be tough
Mhm.
because my client has always got to come first. I have an ethical obligation and I have a sworn duty to always put my client first. But I'm choosing to bring a life into this world and I want that life to always come first.
Yeah.
And so I just, I never acted on it, but that was what was sort of going on in my brain
Mhm.
at that time.
And again, kind of as we move towards this idea, you said your husband was always the entrepreneur, but it turns out uh, you were are. And it goes back to kind of your that early childhood stuff that
Hmm.
really set a table that you wouldn't sit at for another 20 odd years, right?
Right.
Um, so, well, two things. One, did you review the contract?
I did.
Okay.
I did.
And had the baby, obviously.
Yes, and had the baby, but it was a long labor, so I had plenty of time. So it worked out just fine. But it was one of those aha moments.
Hmm. And so now and then there were three, and
And
you still
yeah,
have a career, and to your point, right? A promise to put the client first. So that sets up a little bit for where we're headed.
mhm.
Um, so how long did that continue? As what was the moment where you went, "There's a better way to do this"?
It two things. One is back when I was in Kentucky, I had a really good friend who was a fabulous paralegal, and she had quit working to have a child. And she came in, her husband was a CPA, and she came in and she was bored. And I had a stack of depositions. I had my first case in federal court. And so I did a really quick conflict check and had her sign something. And I said, why don't you take three of those depositions and then bring summaries back on this floppy disk. I'll pay you $20 an hour or whatever it was.
Mhm.
And then went to the client and said, rather than bill you out a typical paralegal rate, here's what I've done. I want to make sure it's okay. And I'm going to bill you less.
Mhm.
But I billed them $35 versus $50 or whatever it was.
Yep.
And they're like, we don't care. That's great. You're saving us money.
Yep.
And so that I had done. And once Gaines, my firstborn, was here, I was very conflicted. And so Byron and Jim and Paul were like, don't do anything until after you've had the baby, blah, 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 blah. So I went in to talk to them when he was about 12 weeks old.
Okay.
And and one of them made the comment saying, you always come up with creative solutions for our clients. There's a solution that'll work for you and us and our clients.
Mhm.
And so I thought of my friend. And so I'm like, all right, well, what if I do this? And I'll back you all up. I'll make you look really good. If I'm working, you can pay me. If I'm not working, don't pay me. Whatever I do should be billable. Um, and so we did it. And it worked.
Mhm.
And it worked for the firm, it worked for the clients. And I said, but the only thing is I want to be transparent with the clients.
Yeah.
And I had a gentleman, Greg Mitchell, that was one of the lawyers with me. And so it also taught me to document everything that was going on in a file. And, before I would leave at the end of the day, I would have everything documented because if for some reason
You weren't available.
I wasn't available, Greg could pick it up and run, or Jim, or whomever.
Yep.
And so that just started a really good practice or habit um, that I used throughout my career and everything, actually. And so, yeah, so that was really it. And then lawyers started calling me saying, because meanwhile I have a second child and then I have a third child, and lawyers started calling saying, you're a mother and you practice and you're happy. And how do you do all of this?
Mhm.
And I'm like, oh, it's so easy. Just go into your firm and,
Yeah.
And Greg was the one that said, you don't understand what you've been able to do.
Hmm.
And yes, it's because you work with some amazing men, but also because of you. And I really think this is the future to the practice of law.
Hmm.
And I was like, yeah, you're not a lawyer. And he
Yeah.
was like, I might not be, but I'm a business person. And I know it's in every other industry and it's only a matter of time till it's going to come here.
Hmm.
And that was enough to get the wheels turning and looking, as I would say, for every reason not to. And having been in both roles, having managed cases and needing to bring in talent and trying to help clients curtail their cost, and then all of a sudden now being this driven, ambitious lawyer that's like, I just want to back out a little bit. I don't want to get off the track, because if I'm off the track, it isn't like you can just hop back on. I mean,
No.
you have to
Yep.
stay active in my mind. And so I started researching it, and finally sort of sketched it out how I would want it as a lawyer that was hiring and as a lawyer that was practicing. And then I went back to my judge and said, I've got an idea. Um, and I remember my judge telling me, "You'll never make it in a big firm, Jane, because you ask why way too often." And of course, I took that as an insult. Um, and but what I realized, he was absolutely right.
Hmm.
And when I went back to him, he get this twinkle in his eye, and he was like, there it is, and it's partner on call. And I was like, well, not everybody's going to be a partner, judge. And he was like, okay, and then it's counsel on call, but call
Hmm.
it what it is.
Hmm.
And so that was really how it got named. And he and a couple other federal judges were who I talked to for the legal side of it. Greg was very much on the business side of it, but as far as legal, and then there was a couple lawyers in Paducah that I really respected that I talked to about it before, actually jumping ship and doing it.
In the current sort of nomenclature, it would be product market fit, right? Customer
Exactly.
interface, product market fit. So
Yes.
so so what year is this that you have sort of, so you're toying with it, you're solving your own, I mean, the sort of the classic hallmark of an entrepreneur is they're solving a problem for themselves,
Hmm.
typically, right?
Hmm.
So
Right.
what year is this that you've kind of arrived at, okay, uh,
It
I'm
was
gonna,
really in 98. And then lo and behold, I got pregnant again. So that gave a whole another year and a half.
okay.
And during that time, I just, again, it was more research, but it also gave me time to think about, I don't want to do it from home. I need an office. Like, there is a level of professionalism that I have to be legit. And so it
Mhm.
just gave me time to formulate all of that. And then I remember talking to one gentleman, because when I did the federal clerkship, I also, on the nights and weekends, I had worked with a gentleman that wrote the Kentucky Trial Lawyer's Handbook. And I did a lot of research and writing for him. And he was so smart. And I went to talk to him about it. And I never forgot his words. And that was, Jane, if you do this, you can't get bored and stop, because you get bored so quickly.
Hmm.
And if you're going to do it, you're going to transform the profession, but you've got to stay on that train and see it through.
Yeah. Hmm.
And so at times, when I wanted to quit, I think, doggone it, I committed to this. I mean, and
Your mom's lesson comes back again in the form of another human being. You
exactly.
made it. Yeah.
And
You made it.
so, exactly. And so that was really, so in 2000, April or March 31st, I would say it's actually April 1st. It was April Fool's Day, is when it was launched.
Yeah. Great day to launch a company.
And why not?
Why
Why not?
not? Great origin story.
Exactly.
You launched on April
Mhm.
Fool's Day. So,
Exactly.
so, and was when you launched it, was it the intention? Oh my God, I'm going to build something. And it's going to, I mean, and I hear a little bit of these kind of conversations with your husband, who you identified as the entrepreneur.
Mhm.
Was he your thought partner on, so I heard I've got thought partners on the law side. Was he kind of your
Oh,
thought partner on
great.
the business side?
Without question. I mean, you need to write a business plan. Well, what is a business plan? Well, this
Yep.
is what the business plan is, which ends up becoming your website, which ends up becoming,
Yep.
he was the business 100%. Um, and by this time, Greg had basically an investment firm that would go out and look for businesses to buy.
Yeah.
And so, um, but his in the beginning, he was more, you know what? What's the worst case, Jane? It fails and you go practice law. You like practicing law. So
Yeah.
what is the real risk here? Because I'm
Mhm.
like, oh my gosh, what if it fails? What if it, and he was like, so what? What if it fails? At least you try.
Yeah.
And so I think he was very much of the impetus to give me the confidence that, okay, at least I try. And I knew, like, even when I went to tell Byron that I was leaving, I told him there is a seed and it's not a baby inside, and I keep trying to cover it up with dirt and it keeps
Yeah.
sprouting. And if I
Yeah.
don't try this when I'm 45 or 50 years old, I'll live with regret. And
Yeah.
I don't ever want to live with regret. And
Mhm.
I've got to try.
Mhm.
And he asked a couple of questions about the kids. And then he said, um, you're going to, it's going to take a while for the profession to figure this
Good.
out.
To figure this. Yeah. Yep.
And he said, but I believe in you. And worst case, you always have a job here.
Hmm.
And so, but I'll, you know, I believe in you, I'll help you, but worst case, you'll always have a job. So for me, it was really not a risky venture.
Right.
It
It wasn't the same kind of cliff jump as maybe some other kinds of
absolutely,
ideas.
absolutely. And to answer your question, Mark, I knew 6 women in Nashville, and I thought if I can get them where they can work, and then I'm successful. I mean, I'm a
Yeah.
big dreamer. I mean, but that really was. It was like I knew 6 women that were really good, talented lawyers. And I thought if
And
I could work to get them work, then I'm a success.
and I think, if you were to abstract this and say, it's a this, what was it in your mind? Was it a staffing agent? It wasn't really a staffing agency, but it kind of was,
It kind of
right?
was. It had
Um,
the infrastructure of staffing and it had the professionalism of the legal profession. And
right.
so in the beginning, like the lawyer in Kentucky that told me don't get bored, he was like, you've got to draw a line. Fair or not fair, it's got to be people that graduate in the top third of their class with at least 3 years of experience. Otherwise, it's going
Mm,
to quickly be a staffing company and it's
yeah.
going to be a race to the bottom. So you've got to draw a line. And then
Mhm.
you also have to make sure when you're interviewing people that it's people who are choosing to do this. And I used to say it's people who had earned the right to have options.
Right.
They did well in law school. They had really good training, but for whatever reason, life has intervened for them and they
Mhm.
just want to keep their hands in and not their total body.
Yeah.
And whether it was an ill parent, whether it was a traveling spouse, whatever it was, and that was and then it was a lawyer to lawyer business, and so then you would go and it was for mid-sized law firms is what I originally thought, because I thought we have a variable client base,
Mhm.
meaning, if we do our job well, maybe the case goes away quickly, but yet we have a static hiring base. So when we hire these people, we've got to keep them at so many billable hours in
Mhm.
order for us to make money. And so
Right.
again, going back on my
You're
early,
making you're making the gap. You're billing at X, the client's paying Y, and you get some of the middle.
right,
Yep.
exactly. And so that was really the whole idea was talented. It was a lawyer to lawyer business for really talented lawyers. And that was the original idea um, when I started it.
And I love how the name, just popped out in a meeting, right? And
Mhm.
you went, "Hmm,
Absolutely.
yeah."
Exactly.
Okay. So your goal was to employ 6 people.
Mhm.
Obviously, you got a little farther than that. So
Mm.
can you talk a little bit about the growth and those challenges?
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting to, when you there are moments in growth where sometimes the person who the person who created the idea has a moment where they either have to there's a change in how things operate, right? When you think about the growth of a business, and there are moments where it can be a moment for that person to step away, step out, step back. So
Yes.
let's talk a little bit about the growth pattern, the growth trajectory, and then where that landed.
Sure. The irony was the first lawyer that worked for me was a man, and his wife was a general counsel of a Fortune 100 company who traveled all the time.
Mhm.
And at the big firm, when she would come in town, he might be in the middle of a transaction and he wouldn't see her. And so he was actually, so it showed me, don't be too narrow in why
Yeah,
somebody would
don't.
want to work.
This is not a female only thing.
Bingo. And
Yeah.
then I received a phone call. And so, that was April. We went on a vacation with my family in July, and Greg and I were walking on the beach. And he said, "You realize we're making money right now?" And I'm like, "What?"
Yeah.
And he was
Yeah.
like, "There are people out there working right now that you've put in positions, and we're making money."
Mhm.
And I'm like, "Oh, well, yeah." I mean, because I was more focused on, "Oh my gosh, she's got this wonderful opportunity, and he's got this I mean, I was never focused on the
Mhm.
money. I mean, that's I did naive, but it was more, "Oh, I'm helping these people. I'm helping this firm. I'm helping this lawyer." And then he said, "I make a living out of evaluating businesses, and I think you've got a heck of a business." And it was, you know what? Maybe I just want to help the profession. And so if you want to make it a business, why don't you get involved and make it a business and let me focus on my lawyers?
Aha, okay.
And that was really it. And so then, everything from,
Now
making sure we
what
had
year is this?
that
What
was
year
still
is
in
this?
2000. We were only 6 months. It started in April. That was in July. And so, and meanwhile, I had called some men in this town. I didn't know what an entrepreneur was. It was just people that had successful businesses,
Yeah.
and said, "Can I pick your brain?
Yeah.
I know how to be a lawyer. I'm not sure I know what to do." And everybody that I called said yes, and they met with me. And one of them met with Greg independently and me, and he had been in the staffing business. And so, as far as the infrastructure and the payroll and the line of credit, and of course, Greg knew all of that.
Yeah.
I didn't necessarily, but then he would say, "Okay, Jane, I'm going to meet you next quarter, and between now and next quarter, I want you to do 1, 2, and 3." And of course, I would do that.
Mhm.
And that becomes important because that's one of the impetus for me to join the Entrepreneur Center is, people that just gave of their time to help us be able to do this. And so we grew, and it was really a law firm, lawyer to lawyer with law firms. We opened Atlanta. Um, And because in Atlanta, they had staffing companies in the legal profession. So I thought, "Oh, then that'll be easy because they already understand the model." What I didn't understand is that just meant they were going to lump me into that box. And it was actually harder to break
Yeah.
down the box to explain that I'm a different animal.
Staffing
But
company. Yeah.
yeah. And so we opened in Atlanta, we opened in Memphis, and then it was, okay, now we gotta figure out really what we're doing. I mean, you don't grow for growth's sake. We've gotta, but we had clients, a Nashville firm would have a Memphis office or,
Mhm.
you know,
Yep.
so that was really, so we were in those 3 cities, and, and we were growing. I mean, we were doing pretty well. Um, and then but in Atlanta, most of our lawyers were working with one law firm.
Okay.
And once I got down there, because I had somebody running the office, and once I got down there and saw the way my lawyers were treated was not, it wasn't what I envisioned at all. And so, it was, we've got some issues. And, um, Mark, but when your house is on the line because you've personally guaranteed all the debt and you have
Mhm.
lines of credit because you have to front payroll,
Yep.
it was one of those. So I started going down to Atlanta every week
Hmm.
and trying to figure out that market and whether we could really make it in that market, or were we just going to be another staffing company? And go ahead.
Was that so in that bifurcation? Because on your home turf, it's a totally different deal, right? You've got the network, you've got the people. You go to a new market and you're breaking in, and to your point, you get put in a box that you weren't put in here. So that's the problem you're working, but you worked it in person. You went down and sat in it.
Yes, because
Okay.
the person I had there just sort of fell into, oh, it's, we've got
Yeah.
orders, we've got, and rightfully so. I'm not critical of him at all. We all learn as we go. I mean, it
absolutely.
isn't like any of us had a playbook even, but it was like, this is not what we envisioned. And so I started going down every week, and ended up coming back and telling Greg, I understand why my parents divorced. And when I'm in Atlanta, it's all about me. I can go out every night with clients. I can drink. I can get up in the morning and go to the gym. But this isn't the life I chose. I chose to be married, and I chose to have children. And I'm not going to sacrifice my personal success for professional. And I think we need to just shut down Atlanta. And because I do think the only way it'll survive, and I had a couple employees tell me that, is for me to be down there.
Yeah.
And my, smart husband said, you never make a decision without accumulating all the information. And so let's start accumulating information. And then he took me to the beach, because that's my happy place.
I was just going to
And
say, it's a common theme in this story.
it is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
And so I remember we were sitting there, he said, what if we all move to Atlanta? And I'm like, well, we can't move to Atlanta. I have Shelly, who is my nanny. And he was like, what if Shelly went with us? I said, well, we don't have a place to live. He was like, well, what if I can take care of everything? All you have to do is give me the green light.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, but
Now,
then you'll have to travel.
At this point, has he shut his other, is he still doing what he was doing? He's still doing that and this.
He's still doing that and this.
Yep. Okay.
And he was like, I can travel, but I don't have to be present, 5 days a week. And so that really, he went, and we moved down in in January of 2003, thinking we would be there 6 months to figure it out. And in that time period, unfortunately, or whatever, nobody was going to be still there employed in Atlanta. We moved our offices from downtown to Buckhead, and really just started over, almost like the phoenix from the ashes. And I just started calling anyone that had a University of Kentucky law connection. And all of them were willing to meet with me. Did not know a soul. And it just worked. And I've always said, we've never worked harder, but our family and our relationship has never been better. And it was just a wonderful opportunity for all of us. And just slowly started turning it around and building it back. And and it was during that time period, I had a general counsel of a public company call me and say, I've heard about your business, and I think it's brilliant. I know some of your lawyers, but you've missed your target audience. I've got a hiring freeze. My lawyers haven't had a raise for a year, and my outside fees just get more and more and more. And there's got to be another option. Would you come and talk with me? And so I did. And that started, sort of a journey into the in-house legal world. And so we just started building it. And meanwhile, I had, 2 women running Nashville. And then Memphis, I had a gentleman running Memphis. And those were thankfully just steady and working. and we figured it out. And then one of my people that was in Nashville got a job offer from AIM Healthcare to come in and be their head of sales. And it was a wonderful opportunity. And we weren't paying hardly anything at this time. And so she left, and rightfully so. And then I found out I was pregnant with my fourth child.
Okay.
And so that led us back to Nashville.
Got
And
it.
so, hired somebody to come in, take Atlanta, and
Yeah.
start building that market.
So by the time, what year did you sell the business?
We sold the business in 2000. Well, we sold a majority of the business in 2016.
Okay.
So this was
And,
still just 2004.
and so to kind of bring us a little closer to that era.
Yep. Yep.
You grew it regionally, like to kind of describe how you continue to open markets, and as you're growing, obviously your role changed. So how did how did it change over time?
Well, as we grew, what would happen is we'd have clients that had needs in other cities. And so then we would do diligence to see how many, because you start collecting data and you start realizing where is your client base, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so, for example, we opened in Boston. I had an apartment in Boston. We opened in Chicago. I had an apartment in Chicago. But what I could do is I would go in, I would take the 6 a.m. out on Monday, and I would take the late flight out on Tuesday night, or the 6 a.m. flight in on Wednesday morning. But usually I would be there, so I only miss one night.
Yeah.
And Mondays, there weren't a lot of things going on at school. And so I didn't miss a lot of kids' programs and anything. And so that sort of became my habit. And, to the extent you're able, you always have to sort of go where you have to go. But that was sort of the routine. And then Dallas and Minneapolis, but I did not have we had someone open Minneapolis for us by that time. And so I would really go have the clients, get have people working. So I had revenue, and then hire someone to open an office. And then I would work with them. And then we would usually have 2 or 3 people in the office, and then I would transfer out.
Yep.
But we would have enough revenue in the office that it was paying for itself.
And I would assume that also allowed you to sort of establish culture, and this is how we do things, and that piece, that sort of intangible piece that you want there when you're not.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. And, and it would also, I think one thing that we did really, really well was interviewing and reference checking. Well, we had a set of questions that would at least be at the core, but then anyone that did interviewing was a lawyer, mostly litigators. And so how to ask questions because you've done depositions. And then the same is true on the reference checking, to really understand what someone's abilities or skill sets or strengths or weaknesses were, because we didn't want to put anybody in a position where they were going to fail or the client wasn't going to be pleased. And so we worked really hard on that. And so it made it more customized as we grew. And then the same on sales. I put together a sales process. And
So Greg predicts that you've got an interesting business, and you're continuing to grow, you're opening new markets, and at some point, my belief is you build a great company, and at some point someone will want it. So when did the call come in? When did that?
It was really, it was in 2015, the company had gotten to the size where decisions were needing to be made. And for example, opening in New York. I did not want to go to New York. And I had wonderful people that worked with us, but none of them really wanted to go to New York either. And so it was just like, oh yeah, that was probably, a misstep on my part. And, but so I'm like, let's go acquire. And then Greg would be like, don't sure, you know, so it was just, we started really looking at things and decisions were becoming bigger.
Yeah.
And I, as a lawyer, had been involved enough where I felt that the founder sometimes stays on too long, and I never wanted to be that person.
Yeah, we talked about
And
that, right? There's a moment where it's like, maybe I need to not be here.
and that was part of it. What I love doing was I love working with clients to solve their problems. Period.
Yep.
I'm a problem
Yep.
solver.
Yep.
And the messier the better. I've got to cut 50% out of my budget. I've got to do, okay, let's get in the weeds and let's figure it out.
Yep.
And so I do think that was my what I love doing, which do what you realize that just spun off different products. And so I'm creating new products. And you get to a point where, okay, we need to have productization and scaling versus just new products all the time. And meanwhile, we've survived '07, '08. We've flourished coming out of '08. We had virtual workforces, '08, '09. We had a playbook how to have a virtual workforce, how security. I mean, we were way ahead. And then at the same time, technology had exploded. And so we were about using the best technology and having project management and having dashboards and having visibility for the outside counsel, the in-house counsel, and our team lead. So we were really ahead of our time when it came to bringing business principles into the legal profession. It was much more than just lawyers by this time. And so we were working with a lot of your Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies. And we were pretty much in various parts, a large part of the United States and a little bit over in Europe.
Okay.
And that was when it was like, I think I'm sort of not the best person. And I think that the decisions that need to be made need to be up, we need to be a big company. And so, that may be payroll, that may be marketing, that may be whatever it is, leadership. And so it was with that we made the call. And we made the call that we wanted to look, and I only wanted to look at private equity. I did not want any strategic, because I just felt there was no one out there doing what it is we were doing. And I believed that we would be able to do what we did across the world if we got the right partner.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was
And
it.
so that's it. And when you're doing it right, when you transact from a position of power, it makes it easier than if you're selling because you have to.
Right. Because we didn't. I mean, and that was always part of the challenge. I think Greg, it was really getting fun for him, because it's getting more complex and the deals are getting more complex and the financing and for me, it was becoming less. And, but we didn't have to. But you're right. We were in a good position.
Yeah. So you execute the sale. And I'm paying a little bit of attention to the time. This has been an amazing conversation, and I don't want to cut short the EC. So I want to kind of skip forward a little bit. So you have a nice exit. You've had a lot of success. You've managed to have your cake and eat it too with your kids, and everything stayed stable throughout all of it, right? And you come out the other side of that. And you brought something up that I think is a good kind of door into the next part of the conversation, which is in Nashville, there's this unique thing that kind of anyone will take a meeting, right? We have a really interesting community fabric that doesn't exist in every market.
Right.
And you so talk a little bit about how the EC got on your radar, and let's talk a little bit about that, and then let's kind of jump fairly quickly to what you're doing now. So you come out the other side, you're now looking around, and lo and behold, who calls you?
It was a headhunter from the Entrepreneur Center. And
Yep.
I knew the Entrepreneur Center when Michael opened it, and
Yep.
Beth Chase, and had donated money because, again, trying to pay it forward for those people that had helped us, and thought it was a great idea. Didn't know a lot about it, but a headhunter called and asked whether I would know anyone or whether I would be interested. And so
Mhm.
I asked the question that I would think most people would ask, well, tell me what success looks like, and that'll help me identify who might be the right person.
Mhm.
And his answer was, well, I'm not sure. And I said, well, I think that's an important answer to have.
Yeah.
And you know, and if you want, call me back, and if not, that's fine too. So
Yeah.
then he called me back and he was like, well, actually, I was really wanting to see if you would have an interest. And I said, well, what is success? And he said, well, I don't know that we really know, but I'd love for you to meet with the hiring committee.
Mhm.
And you all can discuss that. And so I did. And that, I mean, I knew Clint, Linda, Beth, and Kevin Roddy. And so met with them, and, and I think the EC was at a point where I think that was a question.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, that's what attracted me. Because
Mhm.
if it was ready just to have somebody come in and execute, that's probably not me.
Yeah.
If you needed somebody to come in and figure out where are we versus when we started, and where is Nashville now, and what is the need, if there is a need, what does it look like, and where would where do we play, so that we can
Mhm.
be good stewards of the people who give money, etc. And so that
Mhm.
was, I came on, told him I would have an answer in the first 90 days. And so I met
Oh,
with a lot of people, you probably being one of them, in those
yeah.
first,
My friend, yeah.
first 90 days, and just trying to figure out, you know, what's its purpose, why is it here, etc. And found it is a very important role in our community, and a great board, great people, and really cool founders. And so, I don't know that I anticipated when the tornado hit, we immediately opened our doors for our business owners over in North Nashville so that they had
Yep.
a place to work. And then, of course, COVID hit.
Yep.
And so we went virtual within a week, and had all of our programming virtual, as we all had to shut down those 30 days. And then
Yeah.
the city let us open, because entrepreneurship, you need to be in a community, or a lot of people do, and you need to be able to have electricity and high-speed internet, and not your kids at home, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
So that was it. So I was there, and I told them 3 to 5 years at most, because I just wanted to get in, figure it out, and work with the board to put together a strategy, and then it
Mhm.
would be my time to move on.
Yeah.
And that was basically what happened.
Yeah.
And that was the Entrepreneur Center.
And I feel like I hate that we had to shortcut that a little bit, because I think it's a little more complicated than that. And you've also sort of described tornado, oh, global pandemic, like just, oh, we got that, no problem. But
Mhm.
the idea of, having built this large organization, in a way, it would seem to me that the EC, and I don't want to say that it would seem like sort of easy isn't the right word, but for lack of a better word, right? Wow, well, this will be fairly easy. When you think about getting in there, what were the things that you went, oh, I didn't anticipate this. Where were
Um,
the
a nonprofit.
yeah,
It's a nonprofit. And
yep,
I didn't appreciate how different that would be.
yeah,
Now, that being said, I did think that all I did was go back to the original idea. And that's where it's like, for successful entrepreneurs and business people to give time and money to help that next generation. And we created the circle.
yeah,
And, where do you fit on the circle? Are you early stage? Are you, mid stage? Are you looking at
mhm,
an exit one day, or have you exited? And then where do we play? Where is our strong suit? And where do others in the community play, so that we can not create confusion, but create clarity for founders?
yeah. And I
And
remember those early days around the kind of the early board table. That was the discussion, was where do we play? And it seems like that conversation's still going on when I talk to Sam today, and I don't know that it ever ends.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, there's a lot of people in town in the space, and so it really, for me, it was always you're before Series A,
Mhm.
you're
Yeah.
before, and every entrepreneur is different, and their needs are different, and so some need space in a mailbox, some need programming, and
Mhm.
just trying to make sure that we had the resources to be able to make it a good use of their time
Yeah.
was, of importance. But yes,
And to your point, to the folks who are supporting it, that they felt like the dollars in were creating the impact that they were after.
right,
Yeah.
right. Yep. So,
So where what are you doing now?
yeah, I mean, now I was one of the founding members in Torch with Joe
Yep.
Maxwell. And Joe and my husband were in EO together many years ago, and we've known each other for years. And when I was at the EC, it would be really cool because once people exit, and they've sold their business, some people just want a place to go.
Mhm.
And so I had and so that was one thing. And then two, have it organic. Like you might have people that do want to invest and take an active role in a company. You might have people that want mentorship, but just more on a as needed organic way. And so when Joe called and asked whether Greg and I would be interested in coming in and being one of the co-founders of Torch, for me, it was almost the next stage
Mhm.
um, after the EC. And so it's a way to pay it forward still and hopefully be able to work with some really cool founders and hopefully be able to help in some ways. And then, and then the other thing, quite honestly, Mark, is, my daughter asked me when I left the EC, what are you going to do? You've worked since you were 15 years old. I mean, and I'm like, for us to be able to do what we did, it took a lot of people pouring into us and helping us. And I just want to be available. And my
Mhm.
siblings are now of the age where, we're all getting older and my parents have both passed. And so just being available, whether that means to go on a trip or, my sister
Yeah.
and I were just in Chicago together this past weekend, or my brother had surgery and just being able to be there and for them and friends. And so it's and for my family, my
Yeah.
immediate family as well, is just being more available than possibly I was able to be at certain times in my life.
Well, and I think, I don't think you find a headstone in the graveyard that says he or she just worked, that wish they had worked an extra day in their life, right? At some
Right.
point, enough is enough.
Hmm. Yes. Yeah. And and
All
and
right.
we're
Well,
fortunate enough to be able to say that.
yeah, that's right. So to kind of land the plane, I want to kind of put the question to you that we talked about a little bit before, which is if you could go back to your 20-year-old self and give yourself a piece of advice that you had wished you had at the time, what would that be?
That's a great question, and one, honestly, no one's ever asked, and I've never really thought about. The only thing, and I alluded to it earlier, um, my siblings are really smart,
Mhm.
and I never felt that I was. And now I look and think, intellect is a variety of different things. And so, I remember thinking, oh, I want to be an ophthalmologist, but I'm not smart enough to go to med school. Or, oh, I
Mhm.
want to, and so I would always talk myself down
Mm.
versus, once Greg came in, he was like, what's the risk? Just go try it.
Yeah.
And so I think believing in my own intellect might have been a little healthier at the age of 20 when I really
Yeah.
didn't feel I was very smart.
Well, seems to me you did just fine, and you might be a little smarter than you may have given your 20-year-old self may have given itself credit for.
So, well,
Yeah.
or I know how to be around really smart people.
Yeah.
So,
There you go. Well, I really appreciate you taking some time for us tonight. It's a pleasure to know more about your story, and I know other people will benefit from it.
wonderful. Well, thank you, Mark. I
Thank
hope
you.
you have
Have
a
a
wonderful
great night.
holiday.
Yeah,
Okay.
same to you, Zach. Take us home, baby. Here we go.